the Villa fans went mad saying I was doing a Zulu sign. Obviously I have nothing to do with them. People aren't willing to change because it's going to hurt their pockets. But I came here and I felt fit, but in terms of like Murderball fit, I wasn't fit.
Patrick Bamford, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm alright, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, yeah. So first of all, if you could explain your goal celebration to us, because I know a lot of people always wonder what it means when you score.
It came about because I got involved in my mate's shoe company, which was like a performance running shoe company that was fully sustainable, carbon neutral from like the factory upwards. And their symbol was a bolt. And so we first of all we were thinking, hang on a minute, can we get something that like plugs the shoe company? And then once we started thinking about it like deeper, we thought, well actually we can have more of an impact if we come up with something that kind of raises the issue of climate change and awareness about it. So it was basically, it's a symbol of a bolt for planet. So people, it got mistaken for other things a few times.
What were people, because what is it like?
It's that.
Right, and what were people thinking it
So
meant?
I remember when I played against Villa and scored the hat-trick, I did it, and all the Villa fans went mad saying I was doing a Zulu sign, which apparently is a Birmingham hooligan faction. And obviously I have nothing to do with them. And I had to actually come out on Instagram and explain what it was. So I remember when I was younger and did celebrations in the playground and stuff with your favourite player or whoever you've watched that weekend. And I felt like the more people that I can get to do that celebration, the more that people start asking questions around it, and then hopefully it kind of grows and people learn more about it as they go on. I have been to a few things where there's been loads of kids like trying to copy it at the playground, and went to a summer camp in the summer and all the kids were doing it, and to be fair, my mate gets sent pictures of people actually trying to do the sign. So
that must be pretty cool, given what you just said about copying people's celebrations in the playground, them doing that, and the meaning behind it must be really satisfying.
I mean, it's fascinating really, because one, I wouldn't ever have expected people to be copying my celebration, but two, I think that the potential that it has to kind of how far it can reach, like iconic celebrations go a long way. It sounds daft, but a lot of celebrations really are they don't have a meaning behind it. So the fact that this has quite a strong meaning, and obviously a really important meaning at the minute, then hopefully it really does help. The aim was getting young kids to do it, and then it would generally be the parents being like, oh, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And then they start to learn, and it's not only the kids that are getting educated, but the adults as well.
So what prompted you to get involved in kind of climate change activism and sustainability?
So yeah, over the last 3 or 4 years really, since I got involved with helping my mate with the shoe company, I started to kind of, first of all, learn a little bit more about the whole issues and how important kind of the world changing really was. And as I got more and more involved and started learning more, I started to appreciate that it's actually like an imminent threat. And so not only was I learning more and getting interested, I felt like I could really make a difference. And it was probably a year into the company that there was the bushfires at the women's golf. And I remember when I was younger, pretty much since I was younger, you always saw bushfires in Australia, America, and you kind of, being here in England in a generally cold climate, you felt like that's just kind of normal for them countries, and you just kind of presumed that that's what happens. So then for it to happen so close to home, and you really start to think that, look, this climate change threat is actually upon us, and we're almost acting too late, we're being reactive now, so it's important for everyone to kind of jump on board, and that just kind of heightened my interest in it. Mm-hmm. There's probably more people who are starting to realise how much of a threat it is, but as I said, we're being reactive now really, and it's kind of about delaying everything that's been generating over the last God knows how many years. So I'm hoping that the world kind of comes together and people do start making a change, because I feel like as individuals, us making small changes, it's not going to make a massive impact on the world, but I think hopefully that will then encourage the big companies, which can have the major impact, to change things and do things for the better.
That's probably a big problem with it, isn't it? Where people feel like their own actions can't really make that much of a difference, but it's larger scale things. So like within the realms of football, for example, what do you think needs to change for football to reduce its carbon footprint and take some responsibility?
Well, there's a lot of things that can change. Some of them slightly more difficult than others, and I think that's probably what scares a lot of people about trying to make these changes, is because they don't know where to start. And that's probably a big thing where the government and people educating businesses and people like that, they can help, because people need a nudge or a direction in which way to go in order to start these things. So I think in terms of football, I know that here we have the reusable cups, but that's just a small thing. So if every football club did things like that and started to make, well, you're not just looking at football clubs then, you're looking at like Adidas, Nike, to start using sustainable ways to make kits, to make boots, and that really changes everything. It really puts their engineering of products to the test, which is scary, and I think that's why it is so hard to make this change, but that's really what needs to happen.
And I mean, obviously football involves a lot of travel. There's a lot of controversy recently about flying to domestic games. I think Manchester United flew to Leicester, which seems unnecessary to say the least. Is that something that you think football clubs need to think about more carefully as well?
You've seen by what Marcus Rashford did, the power of which players have. So imagine a single player has that power, how much power an actual football club has. So really by them changing certain things, look, you're not going to, deciding to take a bus instead of a plane is not, in the grand scheme of things, a massive difference. But it's kind of about changing them behaviours, which then hopefully rubs off on more and more people, which is what we're saying, the small steps. Small steps need to be taken in order to kind of encourage everyone to take the bigger steps. And when I say everyone, I mean the big companies that really can make a difference.
What sort of personal changes have you made in your life, in your habits over the past few years? Like a lot of athletes in the NBA, for example, and in football, going vegan. Have you changed the car that you drive? What sort of things?
So I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I drive a petrol car, but I'm changing that to an electric one in the process of doing so. Recycling, that should be a given for everybody. That's just a simple thing. Changing your light bulbs, like things like that, to more efficient ones, sustainable ones, and just the saving of energy. I'm not saying that, obviously I'm advocating that people become more sustainable and do what they can to help. It doesn't mean you have to all of a sudden stop eating meat and become a full-on vegan and take everything. It's taking the small steps which eventually then start to change your lifestyle, and you start to learn more, and that, as we said, makes a small difference. The biggest positive to come out of the Marcus Rashford campaign and what he achieved, not only the success that he got with what he was trying to achieve, but the fact that he's kind of created a pathway that people in football can make a difference elsewhere as well. Like, you can be idolised and loved on the pitch, but the difference that you can make off the pitch as well is massive. So hopefully that kind of breaks the barriers down and gives people confidence to kind of stand up for change and what they believe in, and be able to support things and help make a change.
Because for so long it felt like footballers were, they were celebrities and they were kind of wrapped up in cotton wool and they weren't allowed to talk to the public. But Rashford's kind of shattered all of those preconceptions, hasn't he? Where it's like, we're intelligent people too, and we can campaign for positive change. It's great.
I think that's one thing that annoys me. I saw it on Twitter yesterday. I think that someone had a go at Gary Lineker for talking about politics, saying you should talk about football only because that's what you're good at. You shouldn't have an opinion on this. And that's nonsense, because if everyone just spoke about what they were kind of their profession and the industry they were in, one, life would be boring, and two, just never get anywhere. So I totally disagree with that. And
do you get that on Twitter when you tweet about your climate change activism? People say
sometimes I get fans just say stick to football or concentrate to football, and I'm like, that's so kind of blindsided.
As if the two are mutually exclusive, you can't.
Yeah, exactly. I can fully concentrate on football whilst helping make a change. It's not like you can have one or the other. You can do both simultaneously.
What do you make of the broader conversations about climate change and the threat to the planet in sort of the UK's media generally, do you think like the tone of the conversations, do you think it's taken seriously enough?
It's hard because I think people have been used to like getting laughed off when they've spoken about it before. Like, not actually literally laughed off, but everyone's taken it with a pinch of salt. Look at the COVID pandemic, for example. When the cases first started kind of coming about in England, people were like, well, it's just this normal thing, like it's nothing major. And then all of a sudden, as the news started breaking, that actually this is close to home, this is something that's going to affect us. You see everyone panic buying toilet roll, for example, and things going nuts. So people aren't going to start reacting and doing things until it's actually something happening really close to them, and then by then it's too late. So it's really about trying to encourage people to change their ways now.
Yeah, and acting like, preemptively rather than having to react to a disaster.
Exactly, be proactive and see what we can do to at least slow it down.
Football is considered one of the great escapisms of life, right? People come here to enjoy themselves and forget about the day-to-day stresses of their week. Do you think that maybe contributes to football getting off lightly with its contribution to the carbon footprint and things, because it's such a popular pastime when it's $1 billion industry, and it obviously it is a big problem, just like all the other industries that, like you were saying, with the big companies that are causing most of the damage. Do you think that's kind of its way out of the argument almost?
I think so. I think that, as you said, football is the most popular sport probably in the whole world, definitely in England, and it is a getaway, but really you shouldn't be using that as an excuse, because there isn't the ultimate reason that it comes down to is people are kind of worried about money, and it's been the kind of problem with everything. I said it before when it came to racism and the Black Lives Matter and the whole thing about the European Super League, and ultimately it's the same with this really. Like, people aren't willing to change because it's going to hurt their pockets. So I don't know, I'm not in a position to say that certain things should be put in place to kind of help people with that and encourage them, but it is worrying that everything does come down to money. And
it's a bit of a shame, isn't it, that you have to financially incentivise people to care about the planet?
Yeah, and realistically they should be thinking about people who've got kids and grandchildren. Like, should be thinking, do they want their kids to enjoy what they've been able to enjoy and to live to see things that they've seen? And look, that sounds really kind of like dramatic when you say it like that, but we don't actually know like what the world's going to be like in 80 years time.
Might take a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, and no one actually knows how bad it could get.
Since you've come here, you've played under Marcelo Bielsa, one of the most unique, revered managers in world football. How would you describe Marcelo in just 3 words?
Meticulous, endearing, passionate.
Okay, because like his reputation is that he's very intense, which obviously you kind of alluded to there with meticulous. But the endearing and his being endearing and being passionate is how does that sort of manifest? How do you guys see that in the change room and stuff?
I say endearing because I feel like he's not the kind of person that you're going to go to and look for like an arm round and someone to kind of give you that boost. But in terms of the way he believes in us and the amount of time and stuff he puts into each individual player, like, in order to do that you have to have a lot of not just respect for someone, but you have to really kind of love them almost as like your son. And I feel like there is that kind of relationship between him and all the players. So passion, that's summed up by the amount of kind of detail he goes into with football, because there's managers who I'm sure go into a lot of detail, but to be able to go into that much detail you have to really, really love football, and you have to really, really want to win. And I think he's so passionate about the game that it's rubbed off on all of us. And I mean, you see what he's done for all of us players and for what he's done for this football club.
I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the game that watches more football than him.
Nah, you'd struggle to find anyone. I think that he sees so many games in a day. Like, I don't know how many exactly, but he watches so much football. and analyses so much football. His knowledge is just ridiculous.
And I mean, you say what he's done for the club, what he's done for you guys as players. This is your most successful spell anywhere, really, isn't it? So how would you say he's changed and evolved your playing game?
So when I first came to Leeds, you just struggled to find many managers that said I was a hard-working striker, or I was renowned as like being someone who gave 100. Not that I didn't give 100%, but was a really hard-working striker, would put in the yards. And I think he's changed that about me. He's kind of changed the way that I look at the game, the way that I work for my team.
Because he asks you to press both centre-backs, right? Like that's
yeah,
kind
so
of
it's part of like our team ethic is the way that we do press and we need to win the ball back. So he's not specifically said to me, you need to run from one centre-back to the other centre-back to the keeper. But we try and win the ball back as quick as we can because it gives us an advantage of scoring if we're close to their goal. So obviously the cynic could say that I'm being selfish because I win the ball back closer, so we've got more chance of scoring. But I know that it's going to benefit the team. So
after those loan spells at Borough, Palace,
Yeah.
Burnley, Norwich, did it feel like you'd found your home when you arrived at Leeds? Everything seemed to click really early on.
Yeah, I think that there's probably two clubs that I really felt like I'd settled down properly. One was Middlesbrough, and then the second was Leeds. And obviously I've spent the longest time of my career at a single club here at Leeds. So to start with, it was actually quite difficult because obviously there's the nerves of coming to a new club and kind of hitting the ground running. And then I got injured, which kind of slowed things up. And to be honest, the rest of that season I was never fully back. And so I don't think the fans fully saw what I could do. And it took a little while for us to kind of strike up that rapport. But then once it did click, I think they understood what I could offer to the team. And obviously I settled in more, I was playing, I felt fit, I was happy. And generally when you're feeling good on the pitch, as a footballer, you generally feel good off the pitch. So that kind of just made everything a lot more like seamless. And I've enjoyed living here, love the city, and obviously love playing for these.
What's the best thing about being managed by Bielsa, and what's the most challenging aspect of it?
Most challenging aspect is that as humans, you always have that voice inside of you that's kind of like the negative moaner who doesn't want to do something or kind of resists to putting in the extra hard work, and is so demanding that what we are asked to do and what we need to do in order to be ready to win a game on Saturday, but also in order to improve as players, that you kind of have to shut that voice out because you know that what he's asking you to do is actually good for you, and you appreciate when you do it. You appreciate it, especially look, a lot of us have worked with him for 3 or 4 years now, so we know that the reason why he demands so much is because he believes that we can do it, and the way we've grown just proves that. I think the best thing about working under him is that it's the feeling you get when you come off a pitch, and especially last year, the feeling we got when we came off a pitch, having been kind of written off when we'd just come up from the Championship, to dominating teams that were like established Premier League teams with our style of play that not many teams have done when they come up. I think that was kind of like, that was so rewarding.
So your role within that team, obviously you say there's a voice inside your head where you might not want to do all of that extra running, but you have to, especially because you're leading the press, right? And there's been a lot of analysis of other teams in the Premier League who aren't as good at pressing as Leeds are, let's say. Yeah. So are you constantly aware that if you don't do your job without the ball to the best of your ability, like, 150%, then it has a knock-on effect for the players behind you?
Yeah, and our press starts with the front. As I don't want to say it's slightly different to the way Liverpool and City do it, but there are kind of the common themes there. And if I'm kind of just half a yard off it, which it does happen some games, it throws off the whole team. And likewise with any other player, whoever it is, the first man who goes to press, if the second man's not directly where he should be, is a yard out of position, then the team can get cut open. So it's something that we work on a lot, and to be honest, the Murderball has probably helped give us that fitness that we can press and still be or have enough energy to attack as well when we have the ball. But we practice everything so much that we know it as players, and we know that what we should be doing. And when it comes down to the fact that it doesn't work, it's kind of our, like, us as players, our own human error. Whether it's just that lack of like concentration or focus.
You mentioned that you weren't fully fit for a lot of that first season, and if you're not fully fit, you can't really play from Bielsa to your maximum ability, can you? One of the famous parts of his training regime is, of course, Murderball. Why is it called Murderball? Can you like explain how the game works?
So it started off as just 11v11, and there's cones in each person's individual position. And when the ball went out anywhere on the pitch, you would have to run back to your cone. The whistle would blow, you'd run back to your cone, and then whoever's ball it was, the keeper would start with it again, and then you'd press full throttle. And it was just non-stop sprinting, and it really was hard. And it's kind of evolved a little bit in terms of we don't have cones anymore, but it is really high intense. It's almost like pressing non-stop and attacking non-stop for a block of 5 minutes, 5 times. And it's just like, it's the hardest session of the week, but it's probably the most like enjoyable session because it is kind of match realistic.
Does it make matches almost feel less intense than that? Or,
it is, because it's basically what the high intensity and the sprint distance, close to what you would do in a game, but crammed in, like really crammed into a short space of time. So sometimes matches do actually feel slightly like easier, and I think that's something that catches people who come to the club, like new to the club. It catches them by surprise, because I remember when I first joined, I'd done Tony Pulis's pre-season away in Austria, which is like getting up at 5, cycling up mountains and like running down mountains. And that was really hard, and I thought that's the hardest pre-season I've ever done. But I came here and I felt fit, but in terms of like Murderball fit, I wasn't fit. And so it took me like 4 or 5 weeks to get up to speed, and then obviously got the injury, but it does take time to adjust.